Hello and welcome back to An Old Man Watches. Today I'm going to be talking about the 1968 Western Once Upon a Time in the West. And this movie is set in the dusty old west township of Flagstone. And there are two main plot lines to the film, which are interwoven because the same outlaw, the rather drably named Frank, is a major player in both plot lines. The first of these involves a struggle over the ownership of the McBain Ranch, which is scheduled to become a watering stop for the railroad, making the land extremely valuable. Owner Brett McBain has been murdered, apparently by the outlaw Cheyenne and his men, but actually by Frank under the orders of the railroad tycoon Mr. Morton. Murdering McBain was supposed to clear the way for the railroad to seize McBain's land without any cost. However, it turns out that McBain had secretly married a woman named Jill, who as his widow now inherits the property instead. The struggle for control becomes a three-cornered one when Mr. Morton is inclined to negotiate with Jill, while Frank wants to seize the property for himself. The second plotline, meanwhile, involves the drifter known only as Harmonica, who is hunting Frank. Harmonica also finds himself under attack from gunmen who appear to work for Cheyenne, but if you've guessed that this is actually also Frank's doing, well, you're a step ahead of the characters, at least for a while. It seems inevitable that sooner or later the multiple conflicts between Harmonica, Cheyenne, Frank and Morton will explode into further violence. It's just a matter of time, basically. So this film was Sergio Leone's last traditional Western. He would make a Zapata Western, a Western set in Mexico after this. And it was the third last film he ever directed. The two movies after it were A Fistful of Dynamite, the Zapata Western, and Once Upon a Time in America, the latter of which was a project to which he dedicated an entire decade. And together the three of them form a loose trilogy that was the finale of his directorial career. So, this movie has some significance in Leone's library of works. It's the beginning of his final grand project. But is it any good? Well, it certainly has its good elements. I think if it was the first Leone film I'd ever seen, I'd probably be very excited about the visuals, for instance. It's wonderfully shot with great use of light and shadow. And I'd also praise how the use of music, or the lack thereof, is wonderfully judged. Few filmmakers knew how to use silence the way Leone did. But it's not the first Sergio Leone film I've ever seen, and I perhaps had time to notice other aspects of the movie because of that. So let's talk about those. So when casting for A Fistful of Dollars, his breakthrough hit, Leone's first two choices for the leading role were Henry Fonda and Charles Bronson. Neither man signed up. Fonda was too expensive for the production to afford, and Bronson thought the script was bad. Eventually, Clint Eastwood would get the role, which launched his career as a Hollywood leading man. 4 years later, coming to make this film, Leone had made three further westerns and was reluctant to make another as he felt he'd said all he had to say about the genre. But it was all the major studios would offer him. And when Paramount promised that he could cast his favourite star, Henry Fonda, he couldn't resist that opportunity. This time it was actually Eastwood's turn to decline a role in Leone's film, and Leone got a 2-for-1 casting wish when Bronson took the role in Eastwood's place. That role was Harmonica, while Henry Fonda plays Frank. Leone was apparently deeply enamoured with the idea of the generally clean-cut, wholesome Fonda playing the film's stone-cold villain. And both men, of course, give good performances. This is one aspect of the film that I can't really complain about. But one thing I think I can complain about, though, is that too many elements of this film are overly familiar. I think Leone was right when he said he had said all he had to say about westerns, because this film felt a bit stale to me. All of his filmmaking techniques and tics are in full effect here, and the resonance with earlier films is deep, obvious, and frequent. The final showdown between Harmonica and Frank, for instance, is pretty much the long rerun of very similar showdowns at the end of both A Few Dollars More and The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. What was once innovative and distinctive style has become far less impactful, to me anyway, as it becomes overly familiar, almost a cliche of itself. The echoes of The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly go much further than this, though. The scenario again involves three gunslingers competing over a prize. It's land this time instead of a treasure. One of them is tarnished, but arguably the hero. One is out-and-out evil, and one is a rascal. This film even reuses some specific gambits and ploys from the earlier film. So yeah, if this was the first Leone movie I'd seen, I'd probably be more enthusiastic about it. There'd still be one thing about the movie that would irritate me, though. The sexism. This is the first of Leone's films that's included a major female role in the form of McBain's widow Jill. And if the way she is treated in the film is any indication, I'm rather glad he'd neglected to include women before now. Jill is constantly disregarded or treated as an inconvenience, which I could probably put up with if it was just the bad guys doing it, but even the supposed good guys of the film constantly treat her with disrespect. Now, this element of the film didn't attract much attention in the 60s any more than James Bond's awful treatment of women was, but times have changed. And for me, and hopefully for many other members of the modern audience, it may be difficult to like the supposed heroes of the piece the way we are presumably supposed to, given how poorly they treat Jill. Ultimately, I'd say Once Upon a Time in the West is only a movie for Leone completists. If you're a casual fan, watch A Fistful of Dollars, and you've probably seen 90% of what this has to offer, frankly. Next time, we're going to look at the 1958 quasi-historical epic The Vikings. But that is indeed next time. Until then, thanks for watching this video, and I hope you enjoyed it.